MarkRogersTV on SEC football. We're checking out the top 5 players at every position going into 2015. We've wiped out the offense. Let's check out the defense. And before we do, let's make this point. Why is the SEC the best conference in America? And it has been for about, in my estimation, clearly for the past 7 to 8 years. Has it been quarterbacks? No, not usually. Wide receivers? Well, over the past couple of years, the wide receivers out of the SEC have been special, the best in the country. But before that, no, there was no separation there. It's been defense in the secondary, linebackers, but let's start with the defensive line. If there would be one position where the SEC has separated itself, it's along the defensive front. We were going to knock out the top 5 defensive linemen, but I'm looking at 14 players here. So we're going to knock out the top 5 defensive ends and D tackles. Let's go inside to the interior with the top 5 defensive tackles. And let's start at Auburn with Montravius Adams. He's going to be a junior in 2015. 3 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 12 quarterback hurries. That's going to be the best stat you're going to hear tonight out of that particular category. Montravius Adams, 12 quarterback hurries. He disappeared, though, against some of the better competition in the SEC. So that's where we charge him this season to step up against the better offensive lines. He played well across the board. He's going to play more snaps here in 2015. He's got raw talent. It's enormous. He doesn't have great technique. He played at a tiny high school in Georgia. Didn't really develop into a great player. Wasn't a top elite recruit. But Montravius Adams, we expect to be the 5th best defensive tackle in the SEC in 2015 for the Auburn Tigers. Now let's go to number 4, a guy who is a little bit more accomplished, Johnathan Allen of Alabama. The reason Johnathan Allen chose Bama was because he said Nick Saban was an intense guy, no nonsense, all down to business, just like him. He played as a freshman, made his way into the rotation, really stepped onto the field just in that first game against Virginia Tech, had a sack, a quarterback hurry, and a forced fumble against the Hokies in Game 1. Coming out of high school as the 16th rated overall prospect, regardless of position, so he made an impact in Game 1 and played well as a freshman, but really burst onto the scene as an impact player in 2014. 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, 7 quarterback hurries, and a pass defense, also a blocked kick, as Johnathan Allen earned first-team status in the SEC. Look out for him coming up in 2015. Now, let's go to our number 3 guy. Got to go with A'Shawn Robinson, also of Alabama, of course, and one of the great 5-star prospects for Nick Saban 2 years ago. He's going to be a junior in 2015. So he was a first-team freshman All-American. He was really special right out of the gate, played extremely well. He, of course, played for the number 1 rushing defense in the SEC this past season and the season before. This past season, broke loose with 6.5 tackles for loss. And, of course, at the D-line position, when you take up most of the blockers, you're not going to have glowing, just eye-popping statistics. You're gonna tie up the blockers. You're going to force plays. You're going to get into the backfield. You're going to push the pocket on passing plays and let other guys make the play. 6.5 tackles for loss for A'Shawn Robinson, a forced fumble, 4 quarterback hurries, and 2 passes defensed. Most notably in the win at Arkansas, where Bama really struggled on the scoreboard, probably shouldn't have won that game. 14-13 Bama win, 5 total tackles for A'Shawn Robinson, 1.5 tackles for loss, a forced fumble. He stopped a 4th-and-1 play by forcing his way into the backfield. And those 2 monster running backs for Arkansas, 2 of the top 5 in the SEC, according to MarkRogersTV, Collins and Williams had 114 yards rushing on a ton of carries. This guy might have won the football game at nose guard in that one. He will be a junior, and we rate him as the number 3 defensive tackle in the SEC. Got to flip the page to get back to number 2 as we were looking all over the map for guys, and we go to Mississippi State's Chris Jones. He burst onto the scene as a freshman in 2013, and he went nuts. He was probably better than the more heralded Robert Nkemdiche at Ole Miss in 2013. He made more plays, there's no question about that. This past season, though, he had to deal with double teams because he made such a name for himself the previous season that this past fall, Chris Jones had issues. Not as a player, but again, in the stat sheet, making impact plays. He had to let the other guys make the plays. 26 total tackles. That's it for the entire season. 3 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss. He really set up Preston Smith to make his way as a high draft pick for the NFL coming up in April. Again, the monster year statistically in 2013, but he was even better in 2014. Now, what do the great players do? They beat the double teams and still fill up the box score, and that's what we're calling Chris Jones out to do. As Dan Mullen says, he needs still to work on fundamentals and techniques. Chris Jones, the number 2 defensive tackle in the SEC. So I think that sets us up for number 1, and it's the guy we just alluded to, Nkemdiche, who Chris Jones outplayed as a freshman. But again, Robert Nkemdiche came in as the 5-star number 1 overall player in college football coming out of high school, and he didn't disappoint. Despite all the hype, expectations really didn't disappoint. Now, again, the stats are not going to be eye-popping. 3 tackles for loss last season, 2 sacks, 33 total tackles. He was second-team All-American this past season. Again, he allows his teammates to make the plays, and in that Ole Miss defense, aside from the Peach Bowl debacle against TCU, this, in my estimation, regular season was the best defense in college football. And, of course, this guy is the anchor. Great players break the double teams, much like Chris Jones. We're going to look to Robert Nkemdiche to, despite the double teams, to be able to make the great plays in the backfield and fill up the stat sheet. He is a mammoth monster, strong guy, 6'4", 280. He's going to be a junior this season coming up in 2015. So, number 1, rated defensive tackle by MarkRogersTV, Robert Nkemdiche of Ole Miss. We, of course, have Chris Jones of Mississippi State at number 2. It's A'Shawn Robinson of Alabama at number 3. Then you go with Johnathan Allen out of Alabama, the 4th best defensive tackle in the SEC, and at number 5, Montravius Adams out of Auburn. Now we need to hear from you. Run us down your top 5 D tackles in the SEC right here on Mark Rogers TV.